Welcome to my first Will It Run, or in this case, Will It Purr video. So this story here is about this 1970 Arctic Cat Panther. I was out with the in-laws this fall, and they said that they had this old snowmobile that they pulled out from the shed that they were going to take into the recyclers. Basically, it was going to be kind of a junket type scenario. And me being curious and these sorts of things, I decided to ask if I could take a look at this thing because, I didn't know. It could have been in terrible shape. Mice could have eaten it up. Could have been abused in its past. It could have been in real bad shape. So I was just kind of curious to see what this thing looked like, to see if I had any potential interest in it or not. So when I walked down there, they had it pulled out from the shed. I took a look at it, and it's a pretty complete, old snowmobile. I think we can all see it. There's that crack in the windshield. You can see there's these little tears, in the seat cover. But it's pretty much all there. For it being the age that it is, I mean, it's surprisingly intact. When I first looked at it, I really had no idea what year it was. I don't really follow old Arctic Cat snowmobiles all that close. But I just thought it looked pretty cool. My guess is probably it was late 60s, early 70s was my guess. And there were just a couple things that really struck a chord with me. I mean, how could you not love that leopard print seat cover that you see there? And it's just got, pretty unique styling. I like the chrome hood vents that are in it. I like that cursive script in the front. And just basically the fact that it's all there. I mean, this thing is just screaming to have a little bit of TLC put back into it and get a little bit of use. So I had told him at that point, I said, it's way too nice of a sled to go ahead and just take away, to the recycler there. I said, let me take it. And I said, I bet I can get, at least a couple $100 for it. I'm sure there's some people, that are probably looking for it. And I said, and who knows, maybe I'll see if I can get this thing to run. So just, another view at it. This is when I brought it to my house, but these are pictures fresh from unloading it there from the pickup. So just a nice side profile of it. So as you can see, it's all there. And once again, there's that leopard print. I wish that it was a little bit better shape, but it's still pretty cool to me. Get that nice late 60s, early 70s vibe, and to have something as exotic as leopard print seat covers, on a factory snowmobile is pretty cool. And then how could you not like that tank behind the seat? It's so archaic and just a sign of where the first snowmobiles, came from. Another, interesting conversation piece. Here's the last thing that really made it for me and made this thing jump in the back of my pickup. You can see we got this rotary engine. It's a 330cc single rotor engine. It's a Sachs. And, I had heard rumors, of course, of rotaries being in snowmobiles, in the past, but I don't know that I've ever seen one. And so there was just kind of that wow factor, that unique factor for me that made it interesting. And also, I've tinkered around with a lot of small engine type stuff, whether it be snowmobiles, or motorcycles, or, getting into old vehicles, which I know isn't small engine, but simpler type times things. And I really had some interest in, can I get this rotary to run? I don't even know the last time this thing had run. There was a sticker on it. The last one I seen was a registration from, I think it was 79. I'm guessing it may have been run a little bit into the 80s. And I don't really know how much had been run past that. So this is a legitimate barn find from a ranch in southeastern Montana. And this is kind of the whole start for this whole story.
All right, let's take a look at this butte inside the shed here. So, as we kind of seen before in some of those pictures in the introductory part of the video, this thing really is a pretty good timepiece. It's been sitting in a shed for, geez, who knows how many years. It's got a nice little crack there, in the windshield. And it's not perfect. There's a few little things here and there that it needs a little bit of help with, but it's really not in that bad a shape for being a 52-year-old machine at this point. So this is, of course, what I looked at when I first seen it and thought, oh man, this thing, it still has some life left in it. Let's see if we can get this thing back onto the snow. You know, the styling of it, I mean, it just screams late 60s, early 70s. So let's just kind of take a look at it. This isn't going to be the virgin, you know, to look at it. I've already done a little bit of stuff, which I'll cover later on in the video here, but let's just take a look at this thing for what it is. So we get here a little bit closer. You gotta love that leopard print seat cover. So I do need to try to do some cleanup on it. I think that pattern will come out a little bit more with cleaning it up, but it is pretty faded. So I think it has sat out in the sun somewhat, but still, just to be able to see some of the print that is still in it, it is still pretty impressive. And geez, I wish sleds these days were able to have good character like that. You know, I watch a lot of, you know, will it run car type videos, and like Derek on Vice Grip Garage, stuff like that. One of the things he always likes to look at is the trunk to see what sort of features that you might find. Well, snowmobiles are kind of the same way. You know, newer snowmobiles have their trunks behind the seat, but this one here, of course, is in front. So we can see there's a chunk of rope and possibly, you know, a spark plug carrier. You know, there's just some miscellaneous odds and ends. More plugs here. Looks like an old piece of, or old belt. It's in here. I haven't even taken a look at it yet to see if it's salvageable or not. I'm sure this many years in that shape is probably all dried and cracked and nasty, but you know, who knows? Let's take a look at it. I do need to vacuum this thing, and we'll be doing that before we do this first fire up. But that's the treasures that you see. You know, like I said, not perfect. You can see that crack there. It's missing, you know, that overall door to that kind of glove compartment area. This piece here that goes above the belt, there was a shield in place, but it was broken, so I do need to try to piece that together, especially before we run it, because I don't think we want that clutch, you know, right there, right in front of your face. Let's go ahead and pull open the hood on this thing. So as I talked about, there's a couple areas that can also be used for storage besides, you know, the glove compartment, and one of those areas is sometimes the belly pan. Not really much to see on this side. We can see the chain case, which I still need to check, see if there's any oil in it. We can see that there's some miscellaneous vegetation in the bottom, so I'll go ahead and get that cleaned up. Things don't look in that bad a shape. That belt is starting to fray a little bit on the edges, but I think it's good enough for us to at least see if we can make this thing run. The muffler, at least at this point, doesn't look to be totally rusted out. That's a good thing. Look at that beautiful rotary engine. So that's part of the novelty of this machine, and one of the reasons that I decided that probably could use a little more life is that, you know, you don't see a lot of these rotaries. I don't know a ton about them. Of course, I know that there's a lobe in there. This one's 303 cc's, a big old powerhouse. I think they're rated 20 something horsepower, so nothing too wild. But let's go take a look here from the other angle. Try to keep running my video here without falling on my face here. One of the things I have mentioned before, this was a ranch sled. So it was a hired hand of the ranch, and so he had this. And so if you're running an old ranch sled back in the 70s in eastern Montana, you're probably going to have one of these things. So for those of you that don't know what that is a snare. So this snowmobile at some point was used for some trapping type activities, probably the coyotes or bobcats, you know, or the like. So, you know, that's a fun find. And like I said, I don't know if the camera will see it, but there is some more vegetation and stuff that we need to go ahead and get vacuumed out of here. But all in all, you know, it's in pretty good shape. It's got the Sachs engine. I've heard it pronounced Sachs. I've heard it pronounced Sachs. Using a little bit of German, I think I know. I think it's probably Sachs, if I had to guess. I've already disconnected the fuel line here, and I've already done a little bit of work on the carburetor. This carburetor, it's a Tillotson, and let me see if I can get a good angle here. It's kind of hard to see there from the bottom, but it's got the diaphragm pump basically built right into the bottom of the carburetor there. And over the course of time, that diaphragm is known to, you know, get hard and crack. Another thing too is that I had noticed looking at the carburetor that it was pretty oily, nasty looking. So I just went ahead and bought a carburetor kit and went ahead and rebuilt that beast. So how does that diaphragm work? Well, like I said, there's a diaphragm material that's in there, and then there's this hose that runs from the engine, and it runs into the bottom of the carburetor there, and it takes the vacuum here from the engine and use that vacuum action, and it goes ahead, and that's what sucks fuel from the tank. When I first got this sled and took a look at it, this line here, this vacuum line, it was all cracked and broken as well, so it wasn't going to be able to pull any fuel. I've since replaced that as well. Let's look at some of the fun stuff here. You know, on the dash, it's got character for days. How could you not like, you know, these sweet handlebars? So you can kind of see there's a little Arctic Cat symbol, and there's the Panther. There's the emergency off switch. So that's just a push button. I think you can use that as your kill switch. You can see some of these other controls here. There's of course your key, and when I first got this thing, it was all gunked up big time, so I went ahead and used some PB Blaster or WD-40, whatever you want to, and kind of squirted in there, worked it back and forth. You know, this other control here, here's your lights with your high, low, and your off, and then your choke. It took me a while to figure out how this choke works. You know, I'm used to choke where you go ahead and you grab that thing and you pull it, and that's what activates it. And so I tried, you know, you don't want to reef on these things, you know, this age, this old plastic, you're going to break something. So I kind of played with it, you know, a little bit, and it never really felt like it was going to really pull out or do anything. And so I thought, well, I'll figure it out later when I dig in the carburetor and figure out how it works, and then I'll go from there. It's actually a pretty interesting type design. So there's this kind of flexible cable here. Oh, I just hit my knee. Oh, funny bone. Anyway, there's a flexible cable here that goes into the side of the carburetor, and you kind of see the choke assembly, and you actually twist the knob. And when you twist the knob, it actuates, it puts twist in that cable, and that's what runs the choke. So as you can see, just a little quarter twist is all that it takes to run that choke. So pretty ingenious, really, from the Arctic Cat boys and girls back in 1970. So one of the things too, like I said, I had started by rebuilding this carburetor. Went ahead and got that vacuum line fixed. One of the next things is that, you know, these rotary engines, you know, they're known for having the apex seals maybe get all gummed up on them. And so I went ahead and I had put the rotor in some different positions, put some Marvel mystery oil in there, let it sit for a couple weeks, and then would rotate this beast over, try to get to a new lobe position, and would put some more in. And so I let it soak for a period of probably, I don't know, close to a month in different positions. It feels like it has compression. I think it's got enough to run. One of the other things there is the spark on it. You know, you never know something this old. You know, it could be around pack rats and mice. You know, is it going to have any spark? But this thing, man, it puts out spark. It looks like an arc welder. So it's got spark for days. So I think we got compression. I know we got spark. I got the carburetor rebuilt, so at least got that portion of it taken care of. And then the next thing was, you know, looking at the tank. And the tank had really some nasty crap in it, as we'll talk about here later. And so took the tank off so we could clean that out, and found, of course, the pickup line inside the tank had went ahead and rotted away. So had to dig in a little bit deeper, you know, and dig into the tank to get that side of the fuel equation solved, and be talking about that here, you know, in a little bit. So let's pull the hood back down on this thing. Take one last look at it. I'm going to come around the back here. When I first got this sled, I didn't even know exactly what year it was, to tell you the honest truth. Let me get this real quick. All right. Yeah, it just kind of sits in there. The hood latch is broke there. And so 69 and 70 look a lot the same. The only thing I could find that was different is that when I looked at the graphics packages that each one of them had, this is a graphics package for 1970. So that's what narrowed down to me exactly what it was. Something else I'll show here real quick. You can see some of these old registration. There's a registration, expires 1979. There's one from 1976. I don't know what's there behind the numbers. So we know this thing was run at least through 79, and I'm guessing a while longer. But at a certain point, of course, it was just parked in the shed, and there it sat. So let's take one more good look at this beast before we dig deeper. There is something that I do want to show real quick that I do think is kind of funny. Let's get up close and personal on the front end here. Go ahead and look at that Arctic Cat script there below the headlight on the front grille. So here's why I think this is interesting, is that there's a certain sort of style that you've seen multiple manufacturers use back in that era. So let's take a quick look at this. This is the Arctic Cat script from 1970. And this is the script that's on the back of my 1972 Ford pickup. And Ford used this, you know, sort of writing there in the late 60s and early 70s on, you know, some of their different emblems and stuff. As you can see, it's both very, very similar cursive styles there. So kind of looks like they're possibly, you know, brothers from another mother. So I thought that was interesting. Probably no one else does. So we talked about the treasures that you might find in an old sled like this, and here is what all we found. So we found at least 3 different spark plug caddies, 2 different boxes that got spark plugs in it. So, you know, those sleds back in the days were pretty bad for fouling plugs and things. So you're not necessarily surprising to see that many plugs, although 5 plugs for a single cylinder or single, I guess, plug sled seems like a lot. Looks like there's some burnt up points, but hey, look, I think there's some new points in that bag. I haven't quite opened that one yet to see what it is between the spark plug caddy, but I think that's actually maybe a condenser potentially. There's a spark plug tool for checking your gap. We got a bolt. We got a piece of the hood latch. We got a spring. That roll of electrical tape was all smushed up. It took me a while to figure out what it is. Got us a bolt. We got us our old belt, which I took a look at. It is, in fact, junk. Got some of this yellow plastic rope that was in there, which that by itself can be some pretty horrible stuff, but I guess if you needed it, might be the thing that saved your day. And then we talked about earlier, you know, there's the snare. So quite an impressive haul here from this old Panther. All right, you may be wondering why I have the back end of this snowmobile up in the air on a 2x4 with the track dropped out of it. So part of the reason I ended up doing that is because I needed to go ahead and remove the fuel tank. There was a bunch of nasty gas that was in it. I had looked in the pickup line that was supposed to come up out of the tank there. It had broken off and it was laying in the bottom of the tank. So there was no way that it was ever going to pick any fuel up. The way that tank goes in there, it's basically held in by that rack that you see there. And so that rack, you don't have to undo the entire rack, but you do have to undo these 2 different bolts here at the front that go through the tunnel on this rack. Now, with that being said, these bolts that go through the tunnel, the back side of them has basically a slot for a standard screwdriver, and that has a nut that goes on the outside. When that track is all the way up there into the tunnel, there's no way to get to that topmost bolt. It's even tough to get that bottom one. So I went ahead and just removed the one bolt that holds the track up in the air. You can see there's the track mount there, and it bolts right through that hole. Once you remove that, then you can go ahead and lift the back of the snowmobile. I just use like a 2x4 to go ahead and hold it up. And once I'm able to hold that up far enough, then I can get in there with a flat blade screwdriver, and then I can take those 2 bolts out on each side that hold that rack. Once that rack's loose, then you can kind of just twist the tank sideways a little bit and go ahead and get it out of there. You know, another benefit to go ahead and have the track lowered at this point is that you can go ahead and take a good look at the underneath the tunnel. And so I was able to take a look at the Hyfax, and the Hyfax actually doesn't look, you know, too bad. or I guess I'm calling it high fax. I don't know if that's necessarily high fax or not in that position, but it doesn't look too bad. The inside of the tunnel looks pretty good. And so at this point, I think I'm ready to go ahead and start thinking about getting that tank put back into position. So let's talk about the tank real quick. So I had taken a look into this thing, like I mentioned earlier, and it was just atrocious. I mean, it smelled foul. It was the nastiest orangish, oilyish looking stuff you ever did see. I'm sure it tasted terrible too. And the pickup line was lying there in the bottom of the fuel tank, and I'd gotten this sled to the point where I thought I could make it run, and the only thing I was going to be missing, of course, was the fuel side of it. And with that pickup line laying in the bottom of the tank, there's just no way that was going to work. So the pickup line, you know, comes from the tank and it comes out that hole, and there was a fitting that was there. And originally, you know, I was trying to get that fitting out. You know, I assumed that it was just like a push-in grommet type deal, and tried to get it out, and I just couldn't get it. I tried prying, and I didn't want to bend on the tank or anything like that. So I finally did a little bit of research, and come to find out, this fuel fitting that goes in there, it actually is almost like a bulkhead type fitting, and it has a nut on the bottom of that. As you can see, when I try to put my hands inside here, it sits far enough in there, I can't even get my fingers in it to touch it, let alone get a tool in there. I did a little bit of reading online to try to figure out if there was anything I could do. And some people went ahead and said that they made their own tool. And so I went ahead and tried to make my own tool as well. A little beast that looks like this. Basically, I took a bolt and took a crowfoot and welded it together, so, you know, hopefully I could reach inside of the tank here, you know, and then of course get it over and get on it. Part of my research online said that it looked like it was probably a 3/4 inch nut, which seemed pretty big, but I had no way of knowing if that was true or not. So I went ahead and went with their recommendation and tried 3/4, and I just could never feel like I could even get on the thing. It seemed like I got to the point, it's like, you know what, screw this deal. And I decided to try to drill out that fitting, just thinking it was probably like a soft, you know, fitting. And I started drilling that thing, and man, it was a dirty, hard son of a gun. So I drilled and I kept working my size up, and I got to a point I actually broke a drill bit off into the fitting, at which point I really thought I was done. So then I got thinking about, you know, I've used my plasma cutter in the past and had good luck, where a plasma cutter, you can apply a lot of heat directly to an object, but stuff that's kind of behind it, it doesn't penetrate, or it doesn't cut, and you can get away with cutting in some pretty tight spaces. So I went ahead and took my plasma cutter and I blew that drill bit out of the center of it. And so that allowed me to start trying to drill some more and try to work that thing out. Well, as I did drill some more, the fitting got to the point, it kept coming up a little bit higher. So I don't know if when I was drilling the nut was loosening up or what was going on. But I finally got to the point, it got lifted high enough. I got mad. I put my ground lead to the plasma cutter on the fuel fitting, and I went ahead and was able to pry it up, get it high enough, and I used the plasma cutter to go ahead and cut the top of that fitting off and drop the bottom of it out. And as you can see, there's maybe a little bit of a scorch mark, you know, right there, but that hole is perfectly intact. So I didn't cut in the tank or anything, you know, I was using that plasma cutter. I did go ahead and fill the tank full of water when I was dinking around with that plasma cutter, just to make sure nothing bad was going to happen. And then, you know, flushed it out real good, blew it dry, and then took some gasoline and sloshed it all around. So you're probably wondering, what am I going back in with? Well, I went ahead and got me a new piece of fuel line. That's a submersible fuel line, and I don't know if that thing is made by unicorns or elves, but that stuff is $25 a foot. Luckily, a foot is about all that I need, but that's supposed to be something that you can keep submersible all the time, so perfect for the application I'm using in. Then I went ahead and purchased, you know, this little fitting that goes in the end. It has a check ball in it, so that once you draw fuel, it's not supposed to allow it back in the tank. You can also see it has a filter, you know, element on it as well. So that'll go in there. And then, you know, I'd already talked about, you know, that the fitting before was like a bulkhead type fitting. This one here is what really should have been in it in the first place from the factory. And so that's the push-in rubber grommet in that fuel line, you know, pushes through the grommet there. So basically I'll attach into this fuel line. First I think I gotta put my fuel fitting here through the grommet. Then I gotta attach it to the fuel line, and then I gotta push the whole assembly, you know, through that hole. And then we should be ready to go from as far as what the internals of the tank look like, and it should allow me to get the spot I can draw fuel out of this beast. And that's kind of the missing piece of my puzzle at this point. Since I had this tank out, it's not like it was looking real bad, but of course it had 50 years of age on it, so I went ahead and scuffed her down and put a new coat of black gloss paint on it, so it's gonna look a heck of a lot better as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and get those parts and pieces in there, and I'm gonna get this thing installed in the sled. All right, let's take a look at our handiwork. So I went ahead, and as you can see, we went ahead and got those bolts in, we got the nuts in there, we got tightened, we got our tail lights plugged back in. We have that tank all mounted in there, and it looks dead sexy how glossy and black it is. So pretty nice to see it. That tank, it basically just sits, there's like 3 rivets on each side that kind of locate it where it sits at, and then it just has this bracket or these ears that are just sandwiched there by the frame there, and that's really all that holds the tank in. Something else I'll show is there's this plastic piece that sits in there behind the tail lights. It's this piece right here, and I don't even remember how it was in there to begin with, to tell you the honest truth. I kind of set it back in there, didn't know if it kind of clipped over, didn't look like there's really any screws that went there. I don't know what's supposed to hold that thing in place. So this is not a restoration by any shape of the imagination. So I went ahead and just put some zip ties, put 4 of them in there to go ahead and hold this little plastic piece that goes behind the taillights on. And I think it looks like it's definitely going to work, and it doesn't actually look, you know, too bad either. So my next step here is I need to go ahead and probably get the track lifted back up. In this case, I'll take that 2x4 out and I'll let the tunnel come down, and I'll go ahead and attach the track. So I will tell you something I just noticed when I was tightening up this bracket to hold the tank in. Sometimes it's amazing just the stupid little things that will get you excited. So as we talked about, here is the hole that track, you know, this piece right here bolts into. But when I was at a little lower angle, as you can see, there's a bracket that goes in line down below here. The bolt that holds that track on does go through that hole. So I think that I can go ahead and bolt the track up to that hole. I don't know if, looks like it's a factory option. Look like it's rooted in there and everything. So we got a factory lift. So we're gonna lift this beast to, I don't know, probably a good 2 inches. If that doesn't make this thing mountain ready, nothing will. So once again, stupid little things that sometimes get you excited. So we're gonna go ahead and get that track bolted back into it, and then we can go ahead and get our seat back in there. One last thing too is that I told you in that previous step, we talked about that fitting that goes into the tank there in the grommet. There it is. So it's sitting in there nice. It's going to seal up good. We got her pointing the direction where the fuel line is going to connect. So probably the next step here is I got the fuel line. I'm going to go ahead and blow that beast out from the engine compartment back just to make sure there's not any old junk in it or any obstructions in it. And we're going to go ahead and hook that up. And we're getting real close to seeing this thing breathe fire. The track's back underneath it, so I don't know if you can tell or not, but man, it looks like a mountain sled now, being raised that additional inch or so. So it went together okay. You know, one of the things, I guess, word to the wise, if you're putting one of these together, just take your time. You know, I'm sure there's easier ways than what I was doing, but what I did is I went ahead and I just took a hydraulic bottle jack and put that bottle jack underneath the back of the hitch there. And then you can go ahead and just slowly, you know, get your track in position first, and then just use your bottle jack to go ahead and get the height right. It makes it a heck of a lot easier to get those attachment points. Once you get it close, you might need some punches or some screwdrivers or something like that, and just kind of a little bit of leverage here and there, and go ahead and just keep working it until you get that bolt in, and then go ahead and get it tightened up. So I did find something that is a little concerning. This Hyfax is actually real terrible shape. You can see it's broken there. The other side might actually be worse. So what I should be doing at this point is putting this project on a hold, getting some new Hyfax and getting that in there before we ever do anything more with it. Here's the reality of the scenario is it's early March here. I know my kids are excited to possibly take this snowmobile for a quick ride out in the pasture. We have a little bit of snow on the ground right now. You can probably hear some of it melting off my roof in the background of this video. And I'm going to go ahead and get this thing running because them kids, they're wanting to ride this thing, at least put it around the pasture a little bit. So I'm just going to kind of ignore I saw any of that. And at this point, I don't even know if this thing runs or not. I'm still hopeful it will. And so if it does run, and if the kids can get it put around the pasture and we decide to keep this thing in our fleet, I will get some Hyfax and I will replace it and do the right thing here. But for right now, we're just gonna kind of close our eyes and forget we ever saw this. We went ahead and blew some air through the fuel line before I connected it up to the gas tank, of course. So I don't have it connected to the carburetor yet. And so I went ahead and just took my air tank, filled it full of air, and put some air, backwards through the line. Didn't seem like there's any obstructions or anything like that, so nothing nasty or gunky came out of it. So I'm gonna say that my fuel line is okay in that run from the tank to the carburetor. So I went ahead and connected it there to the tank at our fitting. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and put our beautiful leopard print seat back on it. I got the seat back on this thing, and one thing that's a little bit funny about it, and I noticed it when I went to first put it back on, the seat almost is backwards. Usually you see, that upturn in the seat, the high part is in the front. Of course, usually the tank's in the front as well. So, of course, the high part in this seat goes toward the back. These seats, the only thing that holds them on is a series of snaps that are here on the bottom side of it. And so, one of the things that my dad had said was one of Arctic Cat's selling points back in the day is they used to talk about, that design they had with the snaps holding the seat on, and that if you were out snowmobiling and you were going to go spend the night and going to be sledding the next day, you could actually unsnap that seat, bring it inside with you, let that seat stay nice and toasty with you as you're in the cabin with your food and your drink and all that sort of good stuff. And you could come out the next morning, and while the mother suckers were having to get some frost scraped off their seat or snow off it, you could go ahead and just snap yours on, and you got your nice, warm, clean seat. So that was probably good back then, but this is now. Luckily, amazingly, I was able to get all those snapped back on. I'm kind of surprised that worked like that. One of the things I'll talk about, when you go to remove it, these tools here work pretty good. So make sure you use those ones that have that notch in it, and I use those to take those snaps off. And if you just pull on that material, there's a good chance that it might be rotten. You might pull that snap through the vinyl. Lots of bad stuff could happen. But when you go ahead and use that tool, you can get in that right spot and you kind of pry it out. So I was able to get all these snaps off without breaking any of them, and I was able to get them all back in there. So I think next what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and try to clean that seat up a little bit, see if there's any more of that nice fine leopard print that'll come out, see if we can get some dirt off it. So let's see what happens. This thing's probably going to get a little bit duller as it dries, but went ahead and put some glass cleaner on this, went ahead and just used a rag and started wiping on it. Like I said, it'll probably fade a little bit as it dries, but whoo! Look at all that color came out in there. Of course, got the sides. They're looking a lot better, matching up with that nice shiny black seat or tank back there. So anyway, probably not real crucial when you're trying just to make it run, but it does look a lot better. We'll definitely be riding this beast in style. I want to mention something about the starter. When I first got this sled, and started trying to pull on the rope there for the starter, it would go ahead and it would pull it over plumb fine, and then the rope, you know, would want to hang up and not go all the way back in. Usually that's a telltale sign of just having, you know, some dirt and gunk built up in your starter assembly there. So I went ahead, they're just 4 Allen bolts, and took them out, and then sprayed a bunch of like PB Blaster and stuff, you know, in there, and just kept working that starter. The good news is that it spun over a lot better, and it also brought the rope back in a lot better. Here's the bad part. This old starter here, it basically works on the assembly almost like drum brakes. So as you pull that rope, it expands these shoes that work against the drum, and it's just friction there to go ahead and pull this engine over. Well, because I'd went ahead and sprayed a bunch of PB Blaster and stuff in there, it now made it slick enough that it was slipping, didn't want to pull it over. So I basically took some brake cleaner, cleaned it all up a couple different times, reassembled. I think I even took a little bit of sandpaper and just kind of roughed it up just a little bit, crosswise to the direction of travel, just to kind of put some, grooves isn't the right word, but just kind of rough it up a little bit so it grab better. And it seems to be working, you know, okay now. And so I guess word to the wise, if you do need to lube one up, be careful, because if it works without friction, it might take you a little bit before you can go ahead and get to work again. All right, here's our last little step before we attempt to make this little machine breathe some fire. So I went ahead and installed one of those little squeeze bulb primers right there in the fuel line. I think that should help quite a bit, especially the way that this diaphragm is set up on this carburetor. Here's what I did too. I kind of cheated a little bit. I want to make sure fuel is going to be there right away when we go ahead and try to start it. So I know a lot of people have one of these, you know, like vacuum pump dealy bobbers that you can use to do, you know, one person bleeding the brakes. And so I went ahead, and you can see, of course, the reservoir there. I went ahead and put this little fitting on it, and I put it in the end of that fuel line right there. And I went ahead and pulled a little vacuum, and I pulled fuel from the fuel tank all the way to the fuel line at the end there. And so there's also a check valve built up into that primer. And so I should have fuel all the way in my line, all the way up to my carburetor. So that should help me quite a bit on this first start. I went ahead and left this little bellows, or whatever you want to call it, that goes on the end of the carburetor there. I guess basically it's just kind of a filter to keep rocks and stuff going into it, or big stuff. The reason I left it off for now is that in case I need to squirt a little happy juice in with a syringe or something on this first start, it's available for me to do so. So I think we're ready to make this thing breathe some fire. All right, the time's come, and the whole crew is here wondering if this thing is going to run or not. Grady, is it going to run?
Yes.
Adric, is it going to run?
It depends on your engineering, so I'm going to say yes.
Oh my goodness. Lawson, what do you think?
It's going to run.
It's going to run. Layla, how about you?
Hopefully.
Hopefully. All right.
It's going to run for the hills.
Here we go. All right, here we go. So I did a little bit of reading on this Tillotson carburetor, and it's a little bit different. You know, most stuff when you have a choke, you go ahead and turn the choke on, and then you go ahead and leave your throttle closed, and then you go ahead and pull it and attempt to start. I'll try that first, but I did read some stuff about it, and it says that you're supposed to crack the throttle maybe just a little bit for this thing to go. So we should have fuel in it, so let's go ahead and take our next steps. So it's kind of like a checklist for an airplane. So we're going to turn our key to the on position. We're going to turn our choke and verify that it's on. We got the little squeeze bolt primer, so we're going to pump her about twice. I can hear the fuel going in it. So we're going to go ahead and see what happens here. I'm going to give it a little throttle. Way better better than I thought it was going to. So I think us getting that fuel up to the carburetor right away helped a bunch. And when I squeezed on that primer, there was fuel just right away. And I think also too, you know, to get in this full 70s theme, I pulled out my Mad Bomber hat. And of course, if you're gonna wear one, you gotta put the 90-degree bend in it, so your strings hang straight down the way. I don't know if everybody knows that, but that's how you wear a Mad Bomber hat. I think the sled could feel the vibe. And so, started right up. My kids are in the background here. They're super excited. And we're gonna look at this thing a little bit more. I haven't checked the chain case yet to see what the oil looks like. So the next thing will be to check the chain case oil and make sure it's got some stuff in it. And these kids are gonna be sledding tomorrow on this old 1970 Arctic Cat Panther.
And can we go see? I thought he wouldn't be that good, but he's better than I thought.
All right, let's do a little bit of an update after that first start last night. So I went ahead and I played with it a little bit here today and checked the chain case, and it still had some sludge looking stuff in it. So I think we're gonna call it good enough for right now. When I came down this morning, I put the choke on it, primed her just a little bit. She fired it up on the first pull. This thing is a certified ripper. I'm sure of it. So just playing with it, it's a 1 or 2 pull start, you know, at this point. And I'm just gonna go ahead and show you, just in case you don't believe me. So let me get this thing fired up. Dressed up, they're getting ready to come down. I'm going to take it for a little shakedown run before they go ahead and try to attempt this beast. But I think it's going to be a good time with this old beast, and I'm curious to see, you know, where it's going to take us. So stay tuned, and we'll show first ride around the pasture. All right, we went ahead and we made it out of the shop there. As you can see, I don't have a ton of snow, but I did take a quick little loop, and she's running like a champ. It's a rip snorter for sure. So pretty happy with the way it's running. One of the things we had talked about was condition of that high fax, and I told you it was not in good shape. It's even worse now. Take a look, you can kind of see there that parts that are broken have already vacated themselves, and it's even worse here on the other side. So we still got some high fax toward the front there, but here in the back it's pretty bad. So here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna go ahead and let the kids take it for a rip here around the pasture. I don't think one little rip around, one little circle or two, is gonna make that big a deal. And then we'll have to go ahead and get the track ripped out of this deal and go ahead and put some new high fax on. But we're gonna call her a win for now. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the kids on there, get this thing fired up, and let them go for a little rip.
Let's go.
All right, she's fired up again and idling and purring as only a Panther can. Adric, who's my 9-year-old, he's gonna take it on a little spin here around the pasture. So go ahead, Adric, if you want to, get on it and give it just a little bit of throttle, buddy. He's never ridden a snowmobile much, so we'll see if we can get this corner made. He's kind of coming this direction. I don't know where he's going though. You hear him saying he can't get the turn. Let's hope he doesn't run into the fence or anything. All right, here's Layla and Lawson. They're getting ready to take their loop, so here they go. Yep, just gotta get more gas. More gas. There they go. Layla's not used to snowmobiles either, so a little bit of a more pull than she thought it was gonna be, so There they go, idling down the hill. Doesn't look like there's going to be any sort of runaway with those two, but that's okay. You know, here's something that go ahead and throw out there is that you know, these old sleds, they still have a purpose. There's not a lot of stuff set up good for 9, 10-year-old kids. And so I was fortunate growing up. My dad was able to take me out. We had some old stuff, sitting around, and we were able to learn how to snowmobile and that sort of stuff. And that's what I'm trying to go ahead and teach my kids as well. So should be good for them to go around the pasture and that sort of stuff. And we'll get some good use out of this old beast. So stay tuned. We'll get some high facts put on her later, and I'll provide an update then. So let's wrap this video up. So thanks everybody for viewing as we go through our first will it run type scenario. This old sled has kind of been fun to work on. It's amazing looking at that stuff, of course, from the late 60s, early 70s, whether it's snowmobiles, motorcycles, vehicles. They're just so much simpler to work on and pretty intuitive too. So the main part of our journey of getting that thing to run, and it actually runs pretty good, was a success. And we took it for that loop. It just kind of whetted the appetite of the kids, and that high fac's real bad shape. We're gonna have to go ahead and replace that. It's early March, so I don't know if our snow is gonna hold out or not. We might get a few little spring storms here and there before it's all said and done, but I need to get some of that high fax on order. I'll go ahead and get it installed, and hopefully these kids will have a chance to ride it a couple more times this year. As of right now, I think I could get some use out of this thing. I was thinking about potentially flipping it and getting rid of it, but I don't know. I kind of like it. What will future use of this sled be? Well, probably for the kids. Go around the pasture. It's the right sort of speed for them. I don't think it's going to get away from them or anything like that. Here's another use for it. Here in Montana, and we got places like Cook City and West Yellowstone where you can actually ride snowmobiles in town. Not that I'm real close to either one of those locations, but I think it'd be a hoot to pull up into town with that old beast and ride that thing up to the bar and have a drink or two and make your way. Once again, if you're going to ride something like this, make sure you wear the appropriate safety gear, especially on your head. And as you can see, this is an example of what you should be wearing to handle the brute power of one of these old 1970 Panthers, especially if you got the rotary. So thanks again for viewing. It's been a fun time. Bye.